Hi, I'm Thomas. Welcome to the course Business Strategy. This is our first lecture, Introduction to Strategy. Let's start by talking about what strategy is and is not. We have some summary bullet points for each of these ideas. Strategy is delivering greater value, higher prices, and different activities. So what strategy is what enables us to do something that other companies can't do. When we deliver greater value, we mean in our industry, in our products and our field of activity, we're performing at a higher level than our competitors. Charging higher prices, in parentheses, in quotation marks, the idea of higher prices is not simply that we put in more features to ask for more money, but that we're actually doing something unlike our competitors that allows us to charge and obtain higher prices from our customers. And different activities is a very important point. That's probably the key focus of what strategy is compared to what strategy is not. Different activities means that we do things that other companies don't do, or that we don't do things that other companies are doing in our industry, in our competitive set. So let's contrast each of these points to see what strategy is not. Strategy is not simply operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness means that you're operating efficiently, minimal or no waste, this kind of concept. That is important to be successful, but there's more to being successful, more to having a successful strategy than just operating on an effective, streamlined basis. Next, lower costs, again in quotation marks. A company does benefit from keeping costs low, but a strategy isn't simply to keep costs low. The lower a company's costs are, the better that company is going to be from the standpoint of profitability, but that doesn't necessarily make the company different than its competitors. Simply keeping costs low isn't a strategy. And finally, activities which are the same but in quotation marks better. This is in contrast with the final point of strategy, different activities. Doing the same activities as our competitors but doing them better, that's good, but that's not a strategy. Strategy is going outside of what the competition is doing and doing something different, or again, not doing something that everybody else is doing. That's the focus of strategy. We want a sustainable competitive advantage. This is the idea of what we are doing differently. Competitive advantage is a definition here: superior performance which results in above industry average profitability. So our strategy means we perform better, and the goal or the end result of that superior performance is above average profitability. Now, the competitive advantage has to be sustainable, has to be something we can do over the course of time, not something that will only benefit us in the short term. Sustainability is, here, the definition, the ability to maintain a position on a long-term basis. So we want a sustainable competitive advantage, something that will benefit us over time. How can we evaluate the sustainability, the quality of a competitive advantage? We can use a framework called the VRIO framework. This is a tool that is good for assessing competitive advantage. And let's take a look at the VRIO framework. The initials are valuable, rare, inimitable, and organized. So let's talk about each of these points. Valuable, greater value than similar resources in other firms. So we're doing something. We have competitors. They're going to be involved in dealing with similar products, similar customers, similar ideas, but we want to do something that is greater in value, and that means we're doing something differently. Again, not just operating more effectively, but doing something differently than what other companies are doing. We have ideas, other kinds of resources that are more valuable than those of our competition. Rare, scarce relative to demand. Whatever the resource is that enables us to have our competitive advantage, not everybody can get their hands on it. Not everybody can access it. Not everybody knows how to use it. That's rare. Inimitable simply means not imitatable, and that is costly to imitate or impossible to imitate. Our competition isn't able to do the same thing we're doing. Maybe it's not a secret. Maybe they know what we're doing differently. They're not able to do the same thing because of the inimitable nature of this particular resource or strategy. And finally, organized. Our business needs to be organized, needs to be structured in a way to benefit from this competitive advantage. We need to be able to capture the value of this competitive advantage. So that means our organizational structure, that means our corporate culture and our corporate philosophy. These kinds of things relate to how our entity, how our corporation is organized. A strategy requires trade-offs. This is another central point to having a successful strategy. In simple terms, you can't do everything. So let's look at our points. More of one thing means less of another. We need to decide where we're going to excel, where we're going to focus, and work on that concept, work on that strategy, work on that sustainable competitive advantage. Not try and do everything, not try and please all of the customers or fill all of the needs of our customers, but we need to focus, and that means we're going to do something and we're not going to do something else. Next is purposeful choice and limitation. The company makes a conscious decision to follow through with this idea that we're going to choose one process, one product, one idea, and say no to many other options that we could be pursuing with the goal of focus. A basic example is in the generic strategies, which we're going to talk more about later in our course. Low cost versus differentiation are two of the three generic strategies that we're going to learn about. A company can't succeed at doing both of these. If you're going to be a low-cost operator, then you're not going to be able to successfully differentiate. Differentiation means that we could compare these as sort of saying basic quality, high quality, or typical product, unusual product. Low cost versus differentiation. So if I want to differentiate, I'm going to have to spend more money. I'm going to have to create a higher quality product. And that is in conflict with low cost. So I have to make the trade-off. I can't be low cost and a differentiator. That simply will not work. So that's a basic example of the idea of a trade-off. And strategy is, as much as it is deciding what the corporation will do, it's also deciding what the corporation will not do. A successful strategy is focused, is narrow, and it's not doing everything. It's making trade-offs and deciding where the greatest potential is for the corporation. Or an NGO, or even a government. So strategy doesn't just apply to for-profit entities, I often say corporation, but this applies to a broader context. The idea of fit is consistency in developing a strategy that we benefit from by having a competitive advantage. It's not just one activity. It's not just one resource. It's a fit of multiple activities and multiple resources that work together. The activities are reinforcing. The idea of 1 + 1 = 3. There's synergy. When we do one particular activity, it has some benefit. A separate activity has additional benefit. By putting them together, and not just two activities, not just two resources, but 3 or 4, multiple, combining them all together to create a synergy that means that the sum is greater than the individual parts, again like the concept of 1 + 1 = 3. How does that work? By putting individual parts together that when they come together, they're reinforcing and they create additional value. Fit creates optimization of effort. So another perspective on synergy. When we do things together, we get a greater result than if we were doing individual activities that are good activities to do, but aren't as effective individually as when we put them together. So we optimize, we maximize our result when we're putting together good resources, good activities that in a combined environment create greater results. And competitive advantage comes from a system of activities. Again, it's not just one activity, one resource, one idea. It's putting things together in a format that is reinforcing and that creates synergy so that we have a result that is greater than the individual benefits provided by each of the activities on a one-off or on an individual basis. The strategic management process is what we're going to work through, the idea that we'll develop throughout this course. 5 steps to the strategic management process. External analysis, which is looking at our external environment and seeing where we have opportunities, where we have challenges, and we're going to learn more about the external environment. That will be our first content that we'll cover in more detail. Next is our internal analysis. What's happening inside of the company that is good, that we can develop and we can capitalize on? Or what things in the company do we need to be concerned about? Do we need to change or perhaps eliminate? That's the idea of internal analysis. Strategy formulation. When we look at strategy formulation, we're going to see we have a number of options for developing our strategy, and companies won't use every option. Companies might use more than one, but they're typically not going to use all of the strategy options. So we're going to look at how to identify what those options are, how to pick good strategy options, and then go on to step 4, which is strategy implementation. Once you've developed a plan, then you take action to pursue that strategy. And finally, strategic control. These ideas and this planning won't always result in the expected result, and you might need to make adjustments. You want to evaluate, did we achieve our objective? What were we expecting? What was the result? Was it better than expected? Did we underperform? A company often finds itself in a crisis situation in which it has a big problem. That might mean a need to seriously rethink the strategy. It certainly will require answering the question, what went wrong? What did we do? And how do we prevent this from happening again in the future? So this is our introduction to strategy. This slide shows us how this course is going to develop over time. We're going to cover each of these ideas in more details, working through concepts, and then in our class activity, we're going to work through case studies. Case studies are tools that you use to understand how to apply theoretical concepts in a real-world environment. We don't want to just learn the theory. We want to know how it works, see how companies have used it in a real-world setting, and then think about what we understand about strategy to evaluate a company's decisions. Or maybe a company hasn't made a decision. We want to evaluate the potential options that that company can pursue and use our understanding of strategy to advise that company, to evaluate what the company has done, the options it has to pursue, and then, in a sense, consult or advise that company in what decision to take. That's how our course is going to develop. This is the end of the introduction to strategy, and I look forward to seeing you in class to begin our first case study.